It's for adults.
I summed up the 10 biggest ones that prove it was never good to begin with. The first one that began the downfall was the protagonist being more of a plot device than an actual character. He didn't have much of a personality, he didn't have a backdrop story, and he didn't even have a goal. Laugh all you want with typical shonen heroes who just yell about becoming the best in the world, but at least they were proactive. Kaneki was passive, a blunt self-insert for pretentious overthinkers. Why do you think he was drinking coffee in fancy cafeterias and was reading sophisticated books? For appealing to college students who think they are smart. The thing is, that's all he was doing. He had no personality other than that and was reacting to every situation and was just there as an excuse for the audience to explore the society of the ghouls. Why do you think when people try to describe him, they can only mention how he turned into a ghoul? This seemingly changed after he got tortured and became an edgelord. Many praised that part as amazing character development, when in reality all he did was mimic the personality of his tormentor and got a sudden power-up like a typical shonen protagonist. This was far from the only time it happened, because the same thing kept happening throughout the manga. Something happens, he reacts by mimicking someone, and then he becomes a completely different person over and over and over again. With a different hair color each time, since this is not a shonen, it's for adults. The transitions were seemingly done with no contradiction to what was going on each time, which was seemingly giving off the illusion of great character development. In reality, there were no contradictions because he never had a personality. That trademark mask you see him wearing on every cover, for example, it's supposed to be reflecting his inner self. But he never did something to deserve it or to mirror how he feels. It was given to him one day and was told, "This is who you are." And then he became that person because he was always nothing more than an empty husk that could be filled with any personality, and it would never feel contradictory because there never was something about him that could be contradicted. Later on, the mangaka retconned some nonsense about his mother that excused his personality, but even that was there just because. It was never reflected in his personality before that point, because he never had one. And if you think he was the only issue with the cast, you are mistaken, because the second problem was everything that was happening around Kaneki. More specifically, the constant introductions of more characters and terminology. To its credit, Tokyo Ghoul was constantly cycling amongst many characters. It never became the Goku and Vegeta show. Not that it could, since Kaneki never had a personality. You can't focus on nothing, can you now? Anyways, the constant introduction of more people and biology terms was making it harder to follow what was going on. I know most fans of the show will defend this by claiming it's not that hard to remember hundreds of characters, and the new information you learn along the way about the ghouls keeps everything fresh, or some nonsense. They are not wrong as long as you see everything as a standalone character or a standalone concept. But, just like Toriyama and everybody else who copies him do, you can't evaluate someone or something in vacuum, you have to see the whole. And the whole is completely confusing, because there are way too many characters, way too many terms, they do not mesh with each other well, and there is not nearly enough plot progression for at least spacing them out and smoothly explaining them to the audience. And that happens to be the third problem. Despite the complexity that should be making the show multi-layered and interesting for a more mature audience, it was hardly making any sense. The world building it was going for was weak as hell, since despite the setting being a world full of man-eating monsters, everything was the same as our world. Ghouls cannot eat food, but they drink coffee? Why? Because it's cool and makes them look sophisticated when they read books about pretentious poetry. And that counts for every explanation regarding biology and science behind the ghouls. It wasn't there to make sense of them, it was there because it sounded cool. It wants you to believe ghouls can fool detection and mingle with normal people by just wearing a mask, when identifying them is as simple as stinging them with a needle. Their skin is very hard, if someone doesn't bleed, he's a ghoul. But no, we wear a cool mask, and we get away with it, and we drink coffee, and we talk about flowers. As a result, it was coming off as pretentious every time it was trying to make you feel sad over the tragedies. And that is the fourth problem. It is bloated with emotional manipulation through sad music and people looking depressed all the time, but there is very little gravity behind everything that happens because the author only cared about creating cool stuff that make you feel sad. Look at Kaneki turning to a monster, isn't that sad? And then he pulls out his tentacle tail thingy and fights all the monsters, isn't that cool? What's that? Ghouls can do nonsensical stuff such as healing themselves by eating themselves? But look how sad he is! What did you say? Characters who are killed are constantly proven to be alive just because? But look at them drinking coffee and reading books while being surrounded by flowers that symbolize something, isn't that deep? Yeah man, symbolism is so deep if it's done to make you look cool, which happens to be the fifth problem, the overabundance of symbolism. The plot was going nowhere, you have a hard time remembering who was doing what, the setting made no sense, but look at that flower, that means something, and that tarot card, it's there for a reason, and that book he's reading, it's clearly a hint for what will happen next. Let's keep overanalyzing what we think is going on instead of paying attention to all the crap in the setting. Now here is an obvious issue most have with the show. Problem number 6, the adaptation is a mess. I mean, the manga is a mess too, but the adaptation multiplies the mess by rushing through everything, changing the events, and by not even being well animated most of the time. And here is where most defenders will say, it's not a problem if you read the manga. Yes it is a problem even in the manga. The anime just made it obvious. The reason the adaptation was rushing through everything is because it needed to have something actually happening on screen besides people talking. And it couldn't do that because, after a point on, the source material was just talking, internal monologues, and symbolism. You cannot make a show out of single panel pages where they are just showing tarot cards or are just a head surrounded by bubble speeches. And yes, obviously, they could have done the Shaft approach and make it seem like you are watching Bakemonogatari. Studio Pierrot is not Shaft, they are paid to make cheap advertisements of the manga, and this is exactly what they did. And since nothing was happening on screen most of the time, they had to rush to the parts where something happens. But even if it was like Bakemonogatari, problem number 7, the plot became an afterthought. It doesn't matter what is going on, it doesn't matter who does what, it's just how you feel and what you speculate about it. There is never any sense of progress and you never feel like there is an objective. I mean, yeah, the good guys want coexistence and the bad guys want to become gods, but you never feel like anyone ever gets any closer to his goal. Everything is up in the air and you have no idea how the story can end. The fans will say this is what was making it unpredictable and thus maintained the tension, but I say it's what was making it aimless and harder to stay invested. Where the hell was this manga going? The answer was nowhere. And before any of you defend this by saying it's not a problem if you enjoy the ride, problem number 8. The mangaka got fed up with his own work and ended it in a hurry. It wasn't because the manga was not selling, it was selling very well. The reasons were because his plot was going nowhere, and half his fanbase burned their volumes and was sending them death threats because Kaneki had a heterosexual relationship instead of being gay as his queer fanbase expected him to be in their delusional minds. Yes, it was proven once again why fanbases are their own worst enemies, who destroy the very things they love and are supposed to protect. But it's not like the fanboys are the only ones to blame for this cancellation. The mangaka invited that sort of horrible people because that is the sort of horrible people Tokyo Ghoul was aimed at. All his characters were edgelords, full of tattoos and were cutting themselves. What kind of people do you think would like that? He ripped what he saw. And I have to remind you all that he also ended the original manga out of nowhere and then continued with Tokyo Ghoul Re sometime later. He did that because he lost track of what the hell he was doing. He never cared about the plot. He sucks at storytelling. He only cared about symbolism and characters that read books and drink coffee. As a result, he had no idea of how to continue at the point he was at, so he ended the manga abruptly and threw in a time skip where everything changed out of screen, including the protagonist, who got rewritten for yet another time, so Ishida could continue however the hell he wanted to. And people dared to call this sophisticated. I don't see what's so sophisticated when, problem number 9, everything in the manga is over the top. There is way too much violence, there are way too many yandere characters, and the story constantly tries to make you believe edginess means realism. It's always the same shit with all these edgy shows for edgy people. Whether it's Elfen Lied, Akame ga Kill or Goblin Slayer, they always try to make you believe this is how the real world is. Full of yandere people with rape faces who love to slaughter and eat people. It's real, man! said the 14-year-old who hates the world and writes emo poetry. And don't try to deny this, okay? That's the kind of people the show was attracting. Pseudo-intellectuals who think pretentiousness and gore means realism. Yeah, it's so realistic. Problem number 10. It used power levels. My tentacle is more powerful than your tentacle because I have a bigger number of midichlorians in my blood. This is not something you find in a shonen. It's for adults. I said it for Dragon Ball and I will be saying it for any other show that uses the same bullshit. Power levels are the definition of lazy writing. They are limiting, they either make the battles predictable, or they don't matter if the protagonist gets sudden power-ups through his angst, which he does. And you know, it's a bit dumber here than in Dragon Ball, since instead of being used to fool the bad guys, over here everybody takes them seriously and evaluates their threat level based on RC cells. Power levels and flowery symbolism are so mature and well thought out. This is the stuff of brilliance that only a masterful storyteller like Ishida, you savage, can possibly produce. And that's it with my 10 reasons. You are now free to post in the comments why I am wrong, and why Tokyo Ghoul is not edgy, and how Kaneki has realistic character development, and why it's not that hard to follow what the hell is going on. Flower symbolism for life! Now let me cut myself.
It's for adults.
Ah, Tokyo Ghoul, a show with a plot that is so easy to follow. After all, there are only 100 chapters nobody bothered to adapt, and a second season that is not even canon and should be ignored entirely. Yup, an easy-to-follow show.
It's for adults.
The story begins with a Shinigami vice captain who is defined only by his obsession of getting a promotion, fighting a holo taxi driver with his bunkai.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
The battle is interrupted by another Shinigami vice captain who is defined only by shark teeth, appearing out of nowhere and using his bunkai for a last-moment save.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
Both of them are careless, so it takes a second last-moment save in the same episode for the battle to end from a captain appearing out of nowhere and using his bunkai.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
This captain is none other than the protagonist, who gets constantly rewritten with different personality and hair color every 10 episodes, while dubbing the whole thing as character development.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
Then a girl with an underwear fetish tells them how to find the next holo.
It's for adults.
They use a transgender freak with an eye patch fetish to lure another holo taxi driver.
It's for adults.
Then the vice captain saved the freak by appearing out of nowhere and having a third last moment save in the same episode by using their bunkai.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
They don't get to defeat the holo because it gets saved by an Arankar appearing out of nowhere and using his bunkai for a fourth last moment save in the same episode.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
They are about to be killed but are saved by the same captain appearing out of nowhere and having a fifth last moment save in the same episode while fighting the same taxi driver.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
And the episode ends with Naruto talking to Nine Tails, refusing to be taken over by his dark side, and unleashing a new power-up for protecting his nakama.
That is not something you would see in a fucking shonen.
Now all you have to do is watch 11 more episodes of this trash, and then complain about the plot in the manga making more sense, when it's just flower symbolism and edgelord nonsense.
It's for adults.
People say that the anime of Tokyo Ghoul is awful because the pacing is completely screwed up, but the manga version is amazing! Well then, let's go over what they say in the manga versions, shall we?
Ignore almost every negative review. It's probably someone complaining about the conclusion.
Or someone who knows it is shit!
The author ended the manga and started the sequel a month later. He likes to screw with people like that. The fact that so many people nearly killed the author because he ended the series so suddenly is really just proof of how strong the story and characters are.
Or because I do not like being trolled by assholes.
The area Tokyo Ghoul excels at most is its characters. Even with such a large cast of characters as Tokyo Ghoul, all the main and secondary characters are well developed and fleshed out, meaning that readers can actually relate and care for them.
Such a relatable character.
Another good thing is how the manga does not just spoon-feed you the facts. They are foreshadowed with various references to numbers, tarot cards, symbolisms, and metaphors. But unless you pay attention to what you read, you will not notice them, and you will not be able to appreciate the manga in its full glory. I would recommend not just reading the manga just once, but at least several times to get what you may have missed.
And that is why they info dump everything with TV programs.
Despite the manga's popularity, it wasn't until the anime aired this year that Tokyo Ghoul exploded in sales and became one of the top best-selling manga in Japan, beating Kuroko's Basketball, Naruto, and Magi.
The show everybody calls an awful adaptation made a smash hit out of the manga. So are you people complaining it did its job, right?
Tokyo Ghoul is a worthwhile read because of the fact that the reader becomes so involved with the individual characters emotionally, and struggles to discern which side of the conflict is fighting for the right reasons. For me, this was exceptional because it is synonymous with conflicts in the real world. Nothing is black and white. We just have varying shades of grey.
So grey indeed.
We get all the information needed to understand what kind of creatures the ghouls are at first, but only enough to still keep them as somewhat mysterious beings. All I can say is that this story was planned very much in details, and a lot of time must have been spent on developing the story, which is always a big plus.
And that is why nothing is ever explained regarding the origin of ghouls.
The story is also original. Not zombies, there are thousands of zombie stories. No, ghouls, not an average story, right?
Indeed, no other story has vampires named ghouls.
Somehow the story and characters really drew me in to the point where I felt like I was in the shoes of Kaneki at times.
Because he was made blonde so you can self-insert.
Tokyo Ghoul has one of the best character development. Our main character grows from a very weak character into a character with strong will and sense of direction.
So much for that great character development. Read what this guy said.
On the topic of character development itself, there is very little, and Kaneki's post-Aogiri arc self is the best the author managed to achieve for character change. Although the portrayal of what a week of constant torture would do to a person felt more accurate to me than other manga with similar scenarios, the change in character was triggered by a single event, and development isn't quite the right word for it, as it is sudden and straightforward. Aside from Kaneki, the other characters do not develop beyond sudden perspective shifts, again caused by certain events.
And that is why the manga of Tokyo Ghoul is a masterpiece. Not!
It's for adults.
Since many of you complained that I criticized the manga I never read, even though what I criticized is reviews about the manga and not the manga itself, I will do you the favor. I will read the whole damn thing and give you my impressions of it. So let's see what the masterpiece the manga is that you insisted that is completely different than the anime and a masterpiece of mature storytelling. The story begins by letting us know right away that the setting of the show is a pile of bullshit. There are man-eating monsters since forever, and yet the world looks exactly as our own. If something simple like cell phones can change our way of life so drastically in a few years, a setting that has man-eating monsters since forever should look completely different. Our protagonist goes out on a date with a girl he just met, and it never crosses his mind that she might be a ghoul. Even though he spent the previous 10 pages talking about the recent murders, the television next to him screaming all the time about a ghoul being on the loose and how he knows ghouls look like people. You can claim he was horny and didn't know what he was doing, but he was still fully aware of the danger and took no measures to protect himself just in case, making him a complete retard, not an average everyday teenager who makes mistakes. Retard. Well, look at that, the obvious ghoul turns out to be an obvious ghoul. Who would have guessed such a cleverly foreshadowed plot twist? And so our ingenious protagonist will die in the very first chapter, but thanks to the power of plot convenience, a metal beam drops out of nowhere and saves his life. We can't let the story end in the first chapter, can we now? The ghoul may be dead, but our protagonist is still dying from his injuries. But thanks to brilliant mature storytelling, he gets an organ transplant from the ghoul and survives. Do you know the odds of having a compatible donor right next to you? Or perhaps the odds of being allowed to get organs by a person who never agreed to be an organ donor? How about the odds of our protagonist just being allowed to leave the hospital without any family, friends, or the police questioning him of what happened exactly? He just leaves the hospital and returns to his normal life as if nothing much happened. The brilliant storytelling continues as our protagonist slowly realizes that he's turning to a ghoul by fitting the description of whatever the television is mentioning at that exact moment. Aside from how convenient it is to have a TV program airing at that exact moment, it is also completely stupid to have such TV programs existing in the first place. Ghouls exist since forever in this setting. Everybody knows about them. This information should be stuff you learn in kindergarten, meaning it's just lazy info dumping where people say stuff they already know. The amazing storytelling continues as our protagonist constantly bumps on more ghouls in the next chapters, with the power of plot convenience, and constantly gets into trouble just for the sake of having constant misunderstandings going on, instead of just focusing on how he will deal with his problem by doing the obvious thing, going to the hospital and asking the doctor why he gave him ghoul organs. And yes, of course, and he should know they are ghoul organs. The dumb corpse has a skin that is hard as iron, but nope, we can have something so obvious happening, because this way you might be fooled to think there is an actual plot somewhere in here. Let's just keep fooling around by accidentally bumping on ghouls all the time. The protagonist faces a ghoul and gets a magic power-up right when he's about to get killed, so he can save his nakama. So much sure and totally not something overused at all. After a very slow build-up, the story is now trying to present itself as morally ambiguous. All of a sudden, we switch from humans being innocent victims and ghouls being murderous monsters to ghouls being gentle, good-natured, misunderstood people, and humans being racist assholes who love killing them because they are different. It could have worked if these characters and themes were introduced sooner in the story, but because both peaceful ghouls and fascist humans were thrown in the story at the same time, without ever bothering to show the emotional devastation of people who lost family members because of the ghouls, it's easy to tell how lazy the storytelling is and how not great the whole conflict becomes. The next part tries to show how the evil humans try to find the ghouls by measuring some crap in their blood. Because as we all know, if you have 5 times more red cells in your bloodstream, you sprout tentacles and eat other people. The ghouls, on the other hand, try to hide themselves from the evil humans by wearing masks. Because the only thing that can betray your ghoul origin is showing your face and tentacles to a ghoul hunter. You can otherwise blend into society just fine, and there is absolutely no way normal people can realize you are a ghoul, even though your skin is hard as iron and your wounds heal extremely fast. So all these attempts to make it seem like it's very hard to figure out if someone is a ghoul amounts to complete bullshit. All it takes is to sting someone with a needle. If he doesn't bleed, voila, he's a ghoul. After another slow build-up, the good ghouls fight the evil humans, and the whole thing plays out like a third-grade fighting shonen, where the bad guys are one-dimensional sadists who love to torture little children, and good guys get last-moment saves by someone else jumping in at the last moment. Special mention to the little defenseless girl, who got a convenient power-up by crying, and defeated an elite ghoul hunter with no effort, only to make it seem he was a tragic character all along because he was married. What a pile of overdramatic bullshit. In an attempt to make the show even edgier, a relationship between a human and a ghoul is introduced. They try to make it seem like it's a controversial topic, but it all blows to bits when the girl outright says that she doesn't care if her boyfriend kills people as long as they are not her friends or family. Well, that makes it all okay now, doesn't it? And after all this fuss of trying to present ghouls as not being that bad after all, they introduce even more sadistically evil ghouls than the fascist humans. These ones get orgasms by smelling blood, and organize death battles where innocent people are brutally killed as the ghoul spectators cheer with joy. So much for keeping things grey. What major differences does the manga have that make it completely different to the anime so far? Absolutely none! Did my opinion of how awful this title is changed? Not in the least! After a convoluted battle with a sadistic ghoul, the good guys win because one of them grabbed him while he was busy gloating about his superiority. For the build-up they gave to this conflict, the resolution was crap. The villain was very strong and got defeated by a half-dead cripple dude. For a story that pretends to be mature, it is repeating too often the cliché where a new character is introduced, we need to know how strong he is, so he gets attacked by some random thugs who of course get pulverized. So we will know this new person is strong. It does its job, but it's lazy and repetitive since they use it for every new character. Speaking of new characters, holy crap, what's up with this ridiculous build-up again? Dozens of chapters were wasted on introducing 100 people and explaining ranks and powers and organizations. There is no plot during this constant info dumping. It's as if you're reading a 500-page index. I hear this part is cherished for its amazing world building, but in reality it has the same importance as in Bleach, where they spend endless pages on mentioning divisions and captains and bankais and lots of other bullshit that do not matter in the long run. All of those who complained that they skipped all the introductions and rushed the plot in the anime don't seem to understand that if these events were animated, all you would get is people standing still and talking for 10 episodes, while random statistics appear over their heads. It would be boring and the viewers would complain there is nothing going on, besides throwing in lots of names of people that are nothing but mini-bosses. In a further display of amazing storytelling, the sadistic ghoul that they thought they had killed returns alive and well. The method he used to heal his wounds was to simply eat his own hand. How the hell do you heal your hand by eating it? And if it's so easy to cheat death, why doesn't every ghoul do the same thing? The infamous torture scene takes place here, where the protagonist is going through hell at the hands of yet another sadistic ghoul, who is totally making things grey. These chapters that are hailed as the most mature character development of all times are nothing but gore porn, which ends with the protagonist getting another convenient power-up. Don't give me this bullshit that he was holding back all this time, and that he finally accepted his ghoul side. He was tied up, half dead, and magically frees himself, and defeats a super strong and fully healed ghoul. And since when do we call character development if you mimic what someone does to you? The protagonist just became cruel like his tormentor, who had become cruel because of his tormentor. This is not development, this is parroting. By the way, they throw in the story that if a ghoul eats another ghoul, it gets way stronger. If cannibalism is such an easy way to level up, why do so few ghouls do it? Especially all the crazy ones who don't even give a shit about whom they kill. If they were eating all the random goons that attacked them, they should all be in the epic levels in a few weeks. And yet not only they make it seem like very few know about it, but also very few even dare to try it out? Which again makes no sense if they exist since forever, and it would be something they would have figured out after 5,000 years. After that, there is this big battle between ghouls and ghoul hunters, and frankly, it's hard to give a shit about what's going on. It's 100 recently introduced characters fighting each other. What is there to care about? You don't know anything about them other than a name and a special attack. Most ghouls also wear identical masks that make them look the same, so they don't even feel like people, but rather like mass-produced henchmen one-dimensional arch-villains are using. Meaning this battle is bullshit since it doesn't give you a reason to care about what happens in either side of the conflict. The only battle that had some interest was when that girl from the coffee shop fought her brother, and even that one is ruined when our Super Saiyan protagonist arrives to save her ass in a done-to-death generic fighting shonen fashion. After that, she's no longer important to the story. She turns from a dynamic woman who kicks the crap out of anyone who stands in her way to a generic schoolgirl who studies hard to get into college. That is the fate all females have in shitty shonen. They get sidelined for the boys to do all the work and become nothing but trophies, waiting in a corner to be taken like property. And the convoluted storytelling continues as it is revealed that the battle was just a distraction, so a jailbreak can take place somewhere else, meaning that they want us to accept that the ghouls sacrificed hundreds of their kind so they can bust out of prison a handful of them. If they did all this fast just to strengthen their numbers, losing hundreds of members is a ridiculous sacrifice. And what is even more stupid is that they didn't even need to rescue stronger ghouls. They could simply eat their dead and become Super Saiyans. If you plan to lose so many people, you might as well kill them and eat them. It's much preferable to waste years to gather them, only to throw them away in a battle with ghoul hunters who will use their corpses to create more anti-ghoul weapons. Speaking of which, the reason they busted ghouls out of a prison became possible because there is a ghoul prison. Aside from how this is just thrown in the story right now, it also makes no sense based on what we have seen. What kind of idiots would capture alive and keep around the very creatures they want to destroy? And don't give me excuses like they want to experiment on what they plan to kill. They can do that even if they are dead. They create all their weapons out of their corpses. They don't need them to be alive. This was all a bullshit excuse to throw epic level ghouls in the story. Something that would have easily happened if the leaders had simply eaten a dozen of their kind. The convoluted bullshit continues with a doctor who performed the organ transplant, creating more ghoul hybrids. Something that was obvious since the second chapter, but nobody suspected. He then reveals a thing that has no foreshadowing, that the ghoul woman whose powers were given to the protagonist is not dead either. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing. She has no purpose in the plot anymore. Plus, death has officially lost its meaning in the show. Powers are given and taken as easily as changing your clothes. And doctors can do any crap they want and get away with it because plot said so. And then they start fighting and there is a lot of nonsense going on I don't give a shit about because it became a trashy fighting shonen. None of the ones participating in the fights feel important at this point. They're all random mini-bosses that are there simply to stall time. None of the attempts to flesh out the characters during peaceful times means anything either, because from the very start the story was nothing but bullshit, thus I never cared about them. And thus the manga ends in a convoluted way. Nothing is resolved, nothing is clear, nothing makes sense, and fuck you if you think I'm going to read any more of this garbage in the sequel. It's an awful manga, my opinion of it didn't change, I wasted 2 days reading something that was exactly what I thought it was all along. People who still defend this bullshit are tasteless casuals who haven't read a good book in their lives and think Naruto is a masterpiece. Thank you for agreeing with me, and fuck you if you don't.
It's for adults.
As expected, the Ghoul-tards appeared to defend their shitty manga in my critical overview of it, and here are the mistakes they pointed out I made in it. Tell me if a single one of these corrections makes any sense, because I sure can't find any. The setting of the story being identical to our own makes sense, because people got used to the idea of ghouls. They live exactly as we do, because to them being eaten by ghouls is something as normal as stepping on a banana peel. Sure man, hundreds of people getting chopped to pieces and eaten every month since the dawn of time gives humanity no reason to change the way their civilization looks. The protagonist didn't take any measures to protect himself in case the ghoul he knew was out there might appear, because he was going on a date. It makes sense that if you are going on a date, you will not take protection with you, unless it's condoms. It makes perfect sense that you will accept to go on a date when you know there is a serial killer out there. It also makes sense that he wouldn't suspect someone to be a ghoul because he never saw one. Therefore, he never thought about it. All televisions are screaming around him about the ghoul stuff he wouldn't care about because it is not directly related to him. That's right, folks. It's impossible to be informed and be prepared about rape until someone's dick is in your ass. Oh my god, I said Riza is dead when she wasn't. What a major mistake I made that changes nothing about whatever I said about the show. In fact, I knew she was still alive and said she was dead, just to make fun of how she later on appears alive again, with no foreshadowing, and without having any purpose in the story anymore. Holy smokes, I said it was plot convenience when the metal beam dropped out of nowhere and saved the protagonist, when it wasn't really an accident, but rather someone who did it on purpose. Guess what, my lovelies? It is still plot convenience, even if it was arranged to happen, because it had no foreshadowing and makes no sense in the long run. It makes complete sense that the police never questioned what exactly happened because the doctor said it was an accident. No reason to ask the victim, let's ask the doctor! Also, it was too unimportant to have an investigation for such a minor event. It's not like someone got killed and another one lost a few organs. It was stupid of me to say that TV programs talking about the ghouls shouldn't exist. It is very crucial to inform the population that a serial killer ghoul is out there, because it totally changed the way the protagonist would act. He went on a date even when the so important TV announcement warned him about it. Also, it wasn't even an announcement, it was just lazy info dumping. It took them 5 seconds to mention the murders and then spent half an hour saying stuff everybody already knows, making them pointless. Speaking of which, nobody seems to give a shit about all these ghoul attacks despite the constant TV programs, and not a single measure of security is taken every time a corpse is located. They don't even attempt to have a simple curfew as means to save lives. The reason they don't? There are lots of ghoul hunters, therefore there is no point to save lives. I made a mistake when I said the protagonist never asked the doctor why he gave him ghoul organs. If ghouls are hated by humans, that would be like asking to be killed. And yet I clearly said that it was obvious that the doctor knew Riza was a ghoul. He didn't just transplant organs without realizing it, since her skin was hard as iron. Therefore the doctor would never call the ghoul hunters to kill him, because he was clearly in it all along. This is yet another example of how the mangaka completely overlooked how easy it is to tell who is a ghoul, and as a result made the protagonist to act like a complete retard and oblivious to obvious things. I made the mistake when I said the protagonist was accidentally bumping on ghouls all the time. In reality, he was always surrounded by them, but had never realized who was a ghoul up until he became one. Which is bullshit, because he was not sensing them. He was obviously meeting them the moment they were killing and eating people. It wasn't a magic power-up when he was attacked by another ghoul and sprouted tentacles to defeat it. That is what all ghouls do when they are in danger. And that is why there are dozens of times where he or another ghoul are attacked and their tentacles never come out. Also, it was the first time it happened and yet he knew how to use the damn thing. Therefore, it was a magic power-up all along. Oh, I see, they were super tentacles. Therefore, even a rookie can use them to defeat experienced ghouls. Sure, that makes sense. Give a grenade launcher to someone who has never seen one before. He will clearly kill a dozen thugs with it even when he has no idea how to use it. Oh dear, I called RC to mean red cells when that is not the case. They are closer to midi-chlorians. Oh, of course, now everything makes sense and is scientifically accurate. Also, this changes everything and makes my entire criticism of the show to be invalid because RC is not red cells. Well, of course, when a little girl can defeat an elite ghoul hunter, she had the upper hand by using something for the first time and knowing nothing about it. Also, it wasn't a magic power-up because she was born with it, and that is why she never used it before until plot said so. Ah, rats, I called Mado married when he was a widower. That invalidates everything I said, just like it happened with RC cells. It wasn't a convenient power-up when the protagonist defeated a super ghoul, even though he was weakened from the torture. He was given food to return to normal after each beating, because that is the purpose of torture, not to weaken you, but to waste their time and then feed you back to normal. Also, it makes sense that the doctor allowed the protagonist to leave the hospital instead of taking him to his laboratory as a test subject. He just used him as a prototype to create more hybrids. And that is what you do with super important prototypes of a super secret project. You don't carefully study them in a laboratory, as he has clearly done with hundreds of others so far. You let it free in the streets to do any random thing it likes. If it doesn't get accidentally killed by a ghoul or a hunter, or captured and studied by another group, then the experiment was successful. Now everything makes sense. The ending wasn't a troll, since there is a sequel. Yes, a sequel that begins with a time skip that ruins continuity, amnesia that ruins character development, and introducing even more pointless characters to an already stuffed with pointless characters roster. I was so biased against the show that I didn't bother to mention all the amazing symbolisms and allegories the story is filled with, because all that totally fixes all the plot holes and the assholes and the bullshit storytelling. I was so biased against the show that I was only looking for things to hate it for, and not because it was full of shit anyways. Also, it is very easy to find mistakes in every show, like JoJo for example, which never tried to be more than what it was, and therefore it is fine for what it is. And let's not forget how I was blamed for criticizing a manga I never read, and now that I did, I am blamed for reading something I didn't like. It's not like I did all that to make a point, or to inform others about it, or some trivial thing like that. Also, it's not like those who are complaining didn't watch my video even when they didn't like it. Tokyo Ghoul dards, ladies and gentlemen, the same type of tasteless casuals who will defend bullshit regardless of evidence. You are all on the same level as Narutards and Sautards, and you even have the nerve to call this abomination better than Parasite. Fuck you, you cancer of the community! There are ghoul hunters in the setting, therefore the world is definitely different than our own, so I shouldn't complain about it. No, you fools! Having the exact same thing with a tiny thing added to it does not make it a different world. It is the same thing with a tiny difference. Something which is impossible if monsters exist since forever. For a manga that is worshipped for its amazing grey and elaborate world building, this is all bullshit. The reason the protagonist doesn't take any protection when going on a date is because he doesn't care. That is why he spends half the story moping about emotions and humanity. He is not an emotionless robot like Tatsuya from Mahuka, okay? So what did I expect people to do in this sort of setting? To be hiding indoors all their lives when there are ghoul hunters to protect them? No, I would expect them to have a blood scanner in every major area, or at least to sting with a needle someone they just met just to be on the safe side. Oh wow, the Japanese people would never allow a simple thing such as a curfew to happen, because screw saving lives and protecting the well-being of your country. People in a constitutional monarchy must have the right to be brutally killed in the middle of the street by monsters. Who are you to think you are allowed to protect them? Of course, in documentaries about things people already know about are still being shown. It's like the ones about World War II. People learn about all that in school, and yet they are still shown on television. Yeah, only difference, the things documentaries are showing are about stuff that are distant from the viewer, and not stuff that are happening right next to him. World War II is something that began and ended 60 years ago. It's not something that keeps happening all around you since the dawn of time. And it's not about the ozone layer, it's about people next to you being eaten. What did I mean when I said Rise had no purpose in the story? After all, the whole story takes place because of her. Yeah, it does, up until the very beginning of the show. After that, she's nothing but a plot device. She doesn't do anything besides giving superpowers to others. Hell, she doesn't even need to be alive so all the experiments can happen. What did I mean when I said the staged accident wasn't foreshadowed? They clearly give you hints afterwards that state it wasn't. That's not it, you idiots. Foreshadowing is something that takes place before an event. All those hints were foreshadowing for who did it, nor for if it would happen in the beginning of the story, or if she was still alive and relevant to the story. Ghouls can sense each other, as proven when the protagonist found one by smelling a corpse. He didn't sense the ghoul, you idiot, he sensed the corpse. And there wasn't even a corpse around when he bumped to the coffee shop girl, killing a guy. Plus, none of the ghouls could sense if the protagonist was really a ghoul, so this excuse is bullshit. The protagonist knows how to fully use his tentacles in the very first time they appear because they are part of him. All he has to do is think how he wants them to move. If they were part of his body and he knew exactly how to use them, why didn't he know they were there all along and why didn't he use them sooner? And don't tell me it is also foreshadowed somehow, because he didn't know they were there and appeared only when the plot said so. Therefore, it is a magic power-up. In a similar way, the little girl who defeated the elite ghoul hunter also didn't use the tentacles right away. Not because she didn't need them up until that moment, but because the plot needed them to appear. And no, there was no foreshadowing to that as well. There is also this excuse of why one ghoul can defeat another ghoul based on rock, paper, scissors logic. This makes it seem like it explains why a rookie can defeat a veteran. It's because he had rock and the other guy had paper. The same depth and tactics of Pokemon. So much for calling the show deep and mature. And no, I don't dislike the done-to-death sudden power-up stereotype because it is not original. I dislike it because it's bullshit and destroys whatever depth and maturity all these ghoul tards fantasize it is filled with. What do you mean the torture happened for the heck of it and for seeing the protagonist break? It can't be both because they are contradicting one another. Also, why the hell did he give him food? If he wants to break him, the food would ruin that. And if it was for the heck of it, why did he say he wanted to make him his follower? You don't even know what you're saying. And what do you mean the doctor let the protagonist live so he can see how his life would change? You were saying all this time he was only a test subject for creating more hybrids. And what information could he gain from seeing him suffering again and again? Sexual pleasure for trolling him all this time? This is all bullshit. And no, I am not going to read the fucking sequel, because even if I do, you will then say that I can't criticize it until it's over, so I need to keep reading. For what purpose? It's a fucking piece of shit since the very first chapter. The more it goes on, the worse it becomes. Why would I keep reading this bullshit? And yet, not only you refuse to accept anything I am explaining again and again and again, now you have the nerve to demand I delete my channel because I have no idea what I'm talking about? In contrast to what? You saying this bullshit setting, the Pokemon battles, the troll doctor, and the torturer with double standards makes sense? Fuck you, you bottom rank weeboo!